You take your Porsche out for a drive and drive down a very long straight road. You drive down the road at a constant 150 kilometers per hour. You quickly pass a Volkswagen that is going a constant 50 kilometers per hour. Which car has the greater net force? Now the first thing we need to do is to go ahead and to identify any relevant concepts, variables, and maybe a target variable that we're looking for. Now the tricky part here is we are looking for the net force. So we are looking for F net. This is going to be for both cars. We'll just label them car 1 and car 2 over here. So these are the two variables we're looking for. But a shortcut to help us actually solve this problem is going to be using Newton's first law, which basically is telling us that these two objects are in constant motion. And if they're in constant motion, their acceleration is going to be 0. And if we use Newton's second law, we have F equals ma. And if our acceleration is 0 for both of these cars because they are moving in constant motion, then the net force is going to be 0. So if we were to go ahead and set up this problem for car 1 and car 2, we have F equals ma. But remember, we're actually looking for the net force. And since we just said the acceleration was going to be 0, the net force of car number 1 is 0. Looking at car number 2, I'll go ahead and make sure to label these force 1, force 2 equals ma. Now remember, each of these constants here and variables are for the specific car. But again, the acceleration is 0 because the cars are moving at constant velocities. Now in this problem, we don't really have to execute very much because we already know one of our variables that we're working with is given as a 0. So for this problem, it's trying to trick you and trying to make you figure out which car has a greater force. So when we skip to the last step to evaluate it, does that make sense? Does it make sense that both cars are giving out an equivalent net force? Well, yes, it does. Even though the Porsche is actually giving out a greater force, it is also ending up to fighting a greater friction from the floor and more air resistance than the Volkswagen is. So you might get confused by the common sense idea that one car is actually pushing harder and working harder and it's producing a greater force. But remember, the question is asking for what is the net force. And since both cars are not accelerating, the net force on the cars are 0. So this checks out.